Angie,
Hey, John.
do you like doing it by yourself or do you prefer some help?
John, I'm very confused about where this conversation is heading.
Angie, we're a podcast about coaching. How dare you insinuate that my very intentional double entendre was about anything else?
So you're asking me if I like to coach alone or with a company?
Was there ever any doubt?
Oh, I just can't with you. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Coaching Clinic with John and Angie, the show for professional coaches that explores the ins and outs of coaching, from working with clients through to running and marketing your coaching business.
If you're a professional coach who's committed to your own personal and professional growth, cares about making a difference, and wants to have a successful coaching business, you're in the right place.
My name's John Ball.
And I'm Angela Bezignano.
Between us, we have over 50 years of coaching experience and best practices to share with you. From getting started to scaling up your business.
We know what works and what doesn't, as well as what it really takes to have a successful and thriving coaching business.
With new episodes every Wednesday.
Make sure you're subscribed to get them fresh.
Andy, today there's a few things I want to cover, some questions that we're going to try and answer. So things like, do you need to be with a company like BetterUp or something similar? What are the pros and cons of that? Are coaching companies getting all the prime clients? Is it better to go it alone? How can you manage a mix? All those kinds of things. So let's get into it. Angie, let me ask you, have you ever been with a company like BetterUp or something similar?
Yeah. Yep. Actually, even later in my career, honestly. Yeah. So I've done it. I've definitely done it both ways. Stop it. I see how you're looking at me right now. Oh my goodness.
Pull your mind out the gutter, Angie.
It's a hard task. It's a hard task. I'll try.
I'm similar. I've had a bit of a mix and have done a whole bunch of my own stuff and worked with companies where I've had like clients by the hour, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's an interesting concept, but I've never been with BetterUp. So I do know plenty of people who are with them or with some similar kinds of companies. And there definitely seem to be some pros and cons to that.
I definitely agree. I'm sitting here thinking about it from all angles. Like, what's really the great thing about it? What pros, cons kind of a thing. Think if you're coming into coaching, and we've talked about this a little bit. We've started talking about, should we get certain certifications and do they matter and all the things. And I feel like working with a company, one of the big pros is that hopefully, if you're being trained, you're not just being trained on their concepts, right? Because there's differentiations out there, right? There are companies that have a very specific framework that they want you to follow, which is fine. And then there are companies that want to rely on your experience, and they're only going to hire an experienced higher level coach to work with their clients. So I think it's fair to mention that there's a couple of different angles when working with those companies.
I do remember when BetterUp first started off, I think it was one of the first times where there was a big organization that were like hoovering up coaches left, right, and center and saying, come on, work with us and we'll provide you clients and we'll have different levels for newer coaches, more experienced coaches, and super experienced or highly qualified coaches. And they have that, and it's worked very well for a lot of people. However, some of my resistance to going down that path was that they require you to have your certification with the ICF, and that they seem to be very set on a particular kind of coaching. ICF certification requires that you primarily focus on ontological coaching rather than consultative coaching, which is very different from how most coaches operate. And I'm not sure from the coaches I know who work with BetterUp that's what ends up happening anyway, that they end up doing more a mix of consultative, which I think is commonly where people tend to go down that path anyway.
Yeah.
So that's where I had some resistance to it, but also it's a lot of hoops to jump through. It's a lot of money to invest. And there is no official governing body in coaching, but ICF is probably along the way to doing that. The EMCC in Europe, similarly, these are now the sort of main governing bodies where if someone is asking for certification, they're asking for it from them. And I've looked at it, and to me, it's a lot of money to pay and a lot of hoops to jump through to get there. But I see the benefits of that. I see the benefits of having coaches who at least have met a certain standard, who you know haven't just called themselves a coach and set up a business, which is certainly how the industry has
Exactly.
operated for many, many years. And that still does. People can still do that.
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets a little murky. You know
Mm.
what I mean? Because I was coaching long before I had any certification, and that coaching was based on experiences, knowledge, creating my own content, which I feel like made me a better coach. However, in that space, it's a longer road. It's awesome. It has its benefits. It's like plug and play. I'm already a coach, right? By nature, I feel like I was anyway. And so I have this opportunity to go work for a company where I don't have to find the leads. I don't have to do a lot of no administrative work virtually, depending on the company, maybe some notes, things like that. But honestly, it's literal plug and play. And then if you're
Mm.
passionate about coaching and you also want the stability of some income, then yeah, there's a huge benefit to working for a company that is spending their dollars to fill your calendar. That's great.
Right.
Obviously, too, what comes with that is ha ha ha, no compete, right? So there's pieces to that. And those non-competes are generally 2 to 5 years, depending on the company. So the interesting piece is that if you start coaching with somebody and you hit it off, you build rapport, and they only want you decide to leave, you decide to move on, like no touchy, right? Cannot touch
Mm.
that. So there's rules to play by, which is fine. But I think being aware of all of those before you just go, oh, hey, why would I do this way when I can do it this way? Well, the longer road, I think, is building your own business and filling your pipeline, right? Your lead generation. That's a
Yeah.
long road. But I also feel like, I don't know, like what was your experience? Mine happened to be a very good one. I'm not going to mention the company that I worked for, but I worked for a very big name that everybody who is a coach would know. Even if they're not a coach, they would know, and was trained there in a very different way and loved it. I did love it. But
Yeah.
so why did I leave? Freedom. Needed
Wait,
freedom. I wanted my freedom back, essentially.
yeah. I started off by myself for
Mhm.
sure, but I was affiliated to some personal development groups and I did bits of work for them here and there. Then I did get brought in as a coach, asked to join that coaching team. And then I got headhunted from one coaching team to ask to join another, which was very nice. And it's certainly a privilege, especially being asked for by the guy at the top. And that required being trained up in a very particular way of coaching people. That it, very much like the whole message of the thing, all the branding was around the guy at the top. And then this is Harbecker, I don't mind saying. And so we had to be able to know the content well enough from pretty much all the trainings and from the books and everything to be able to speak with his voice to some degree on the coaching calls. And so you can't really say that there wasn't an element of consultative coaching on there.
Yeah.
It still wasn't advisory. It still wasn't like giving you specific business advice or specific direction, but being able to sort of say, okay, we can talk a little bit more into particular areas rather than me just asking you questions. I can actually throw
Right.
out some possibilities for you if you get really stuck, or we can actually consider options together rather than just feeling like you have to answer everything yourself. So yeah, that was fine. Certainly the rates were never not bad, but they weren't great. You know, it's
Oh,
one of those
yeah.
things.
Right.
The
Listen,
money's
because they have
okay.
to make their money for sure.
They have to find the clients for you. They have to do all the marketing. They're investing in the programs, the creations, the marketing, the organization, everything. And so all you have to
Mhm.
do is shut up and coach. So if you want those situations where all you have to really do is shut up and coach, it can be great for that.
Right.
And of course,
I
you still have to do some of your own admin, but yeah.
No, and I was thinking that the whole time you were talking, I was thinking to myself, yeah, and then there's the financial component, right? My experience, because many of my own clients have quit their day jobs to become coaches and consultants in their field or other fields, but mostly in their own field. And interestingly, framework worked best for them, right? They wanted to be a part of something where there was a framework and there is guidance, because as you're receiving information, you're getting the ideas of what you should do as a business owner as coaching, right? In coaching in that
Yeah.
field. So I think for newer coaches, it's not a bad idea. It's not an awful idea because it is plug and play. There is a lot to learn. And when you start a business, you don't know what you don't know. But if you're somebody who is already so experienced, and maybe you're just tired of the grind, maybe you're tired of seeking out clients and perpetuity and all of that. So a lot of people do come back into it. But I feel like from that financial space, when you have that experience, you can command that higher hourly rate.
Mm.
And that's hard to walk away from, right? You might have to build up to it, but in my world, it's worth it. So somebody might start out with a company and maybe get paid whatever they get paid. I've seen it from $65 a session, which is an hour, to 150, maybe 200 if it's an executive level. Here and there might be special, and that's just what I've seen and heard. So that's great, right? Like if I can make $150 an hour and you're giving me 10 or 20 clients a week, I'm making a pretty good salary, but it's not guaranteed. There's a lot of things that don't come with it, but you're at least gaining experience at the same time
Mm.
so that when you want to fly the coop, which most do, most people that start out in a space like that, they don't stay forever and ever. I've never seen it because they
Yeah.
realize, well, wait a minute, why am I doing all of this for somebody else when I could really be doing it for myself now? I feel better. I have more confidence. And I do feel like I could command more per hour than I was making before. I mean, I won't mention what I charge at this point, but it is light years away from baseline for
Yeah.
plug and play.
I think when you're getting started, something better up now. I think if that had been there when I first started as a coach, great. I would have definitely been up for that, joined in with it,
Mm-hmm.
and got more, probably would have earned more whilst I was getting my grounding as a coach than I did when
Mm-hmm.
I initially got started, where you kind of left to it all. And they do seem to have a lot of training and opportunity within them to be able to step up to group things and to develop yourself to higher levels of certification and things like that as well. So there's support in
Right.
that system as well. And primarily, it doesn't seem like you're actually paying into it other than you're doing the work for them as a
Yeah.
contractor. Because I know there certainly are coaching companies. I think Active Coach is one that springs to mind, but I know there's more than them who, like, you've had to pay to play kind of things. So you join up and you get all their marketing stuff. And so that can still be very helpful, but it's not for everyone. But they
Right.
have like particular strategies. I think it's more of a franchise style of coaching business, and you have the name and reputation that goes with that as well, which can be great in some situations. But yeah, it does come with a downside. Your earnings are somewhat capped to what they're willing to pay you. Your clients are somewhat capped to what they can assign to you, because I think clients still have to choose you. They have selection of coach profiles to choose from. I believe there's some algorithms helping make suggestions, but also you get rated on every single call you do, and you're still very much on an hourly rate or half hourly rate, and you're limited to how many sessions you can do per client and how much time you can spend with them. And you definitely are, because I have a friend who stretched the rules on that one and ended up getting laid off from BetterUp because of it.
Well,
So
I was
yeah,
going to say, and there's that non-compete piece. So if somebody, as you're growing, if people are like, oh, you're a coach, and they start referring you, there are some companies don't care and some are very strict about, you work for us, even though you're not an employee, which is interesting, but you cannot work for yourself at the same time. Do you
yeah,
have a business? Do you have an LLC? Who are you? And it's like, ooh, but again, I don't want to sit here and poo-poo that, because if I could go back knowing what I know now, I would definitely have been jumping in with a company, because I would have learned so much about, even if it's not so much the back end and how they're, because I don't know anything about what their EAs do and how
mm,
they're selling or whatever, but it would have been a great opportunity for me to at least have some organization behind what I was doing. Nowadays, though, I mean, think about who might be coming into coaching now versus when you and I started. So I know things are much different anyway, and there's so many more things available to people in terms of training and certifications and whatever it is they think that they need. But I think that at this point, I like the structure of working for myself and being in charge of the car, right? Like I'm the driver. I want to be the captain of the ship, not the first mate.
I do like, and I do still work with this as well. I guess we both do to some degree of having that foundation of having a regular contract with work
Sure.
coming through to you and being able to build your own stuff around that. So again, not being
Mm-hmm.
tied down by not being able to compete or anything like
Sure.
that, but having that steady, knowing you've got your steady income as a coach and whatever else you decide to do on top of that. And to be in an environment that actively encourages those things as well is also very good. But yeah, not everywhere is the same. And my experiences working in coaching organizations have varied. And yeah, I don't think anything's been particularly bad, but certainly the very first company that I worked with did get to a point where I was like struggling to get paid from them and things like that. It got
Oh, no. All right.
a
That's
little bit
never a
bad.
good thing. I would say this. Why don't we say, what are some questions that people could ask themselves if they're trying to decide, is this the right fit for me? I would say, first of all, first and foremost, is to do your research
Yeah.
on a company, right? If you're even considering doing it on my own or work for a company, do to your point just now, because you don't want to be chasing dollars. That is absolutely not where you want to be. But I think that's a first step is, oh, let me make an educated decision about what to do. But what do you think are some questions that somebody should ask themselves before they make that choice?
Yeah, they should ask, maybe ask themselves whether they would like to have a bit of baseline income that they don't have to work too hard for, in terms of they don't have to do their own marketing for, and someone can just provide the clients for them. Up and down to that, you end up sometimes with clients that you'd rather not work with.
Mhm. Yeah.
So there's that. You don't get to personally interview and select your clients, but if you're in a company with a whole bunch of other coaches, you might choose to say at the end of a session, this isn't really a great fit. I think maybe you should take a look for another coach,
Mhm.
or even
Mhm.
decide, to try and help them find that other coach. So I'm sure there are ways around that sort of problem. But yeah, think about, do you already have your niche or niche, however you want to call it, figured out? And if you do, and you have a specific problem that you want to solve, this might actually be something that holds you back from going as big as you could go. Because if you're already set up and ready to go, this might just slow you down. That's all I'm saying. So I think it's worth considering that. But if you're still figuring that stuff out, or if you still really want to get more of an experience in the coaching industry and have some income coming through this, I guess the thing I say is, if you're thinking that this is going to be your long-term career, that's where I think it might be risky, because we don't know how long. I mean, BetterUp may be around for years and years, or it may not, but you don't know. You're building your business on other people's territory, and you're in a situation as well. They control how much you get paid to some degree because they have their rates, and they maybe have some control over how many clients you get, and they could end your contract at any time for any reason.
Listen, there's definitely the risk to that. But I also think, too, if you decide to take the route of, hey, I want to go maybe give this whole work for another company a try, you might want to decide because, again, talk about the niche for a second. Are you going to be all things to all people? And the reason I ask that is because there are companies that are specifically geared toward, for example, in the real estate world, there's Brian Buffini and Tom Ferry. They're like two of the biggest names in coaching in that industry. And they both have companies where they have coaches that get paid by them to coach people in that arena. So you want to figure that out as well. If I was going to sign on with a company, what would it look like? Have a little bit of a vision, even if you don't know what you don't know yet. Just come into it with something and say, I was in sales, or I think I would be great in sales. Then maybe you want to work for a company that is geared toward coaching in the sales arena. Just saying, you don't have to. And then there's companies that hire facilitators to come in and just deliver information for them. There's different ways that you can do this and earn an income. And how comfortable are you if you're going to go into that space? If you're going to do it yourself, that's a whole different episode, right? But this is that whole space. What should I really consider? How would I even, if I don't know what I don't know, Angie, then what questions should I be asking myself? And that's like
Yeah.
that space. Do you think you can work for a company? John and I have been talking about the ups and the downs, sometimes chasing money, sometimes not. Most times, I think not.
Yeah.
And looking at the reputation of not the company in terms of what their clients are saying specifically, because if the clients are saying good things, it's because they have great coaches, which is good,
Right.
a good sign. But you also want to look at it and say, what are people saying that work there or have worked there? I did work for a company where I'm a great coach, but I was not treated well. I just was not. And that didn't affect my coaching. So I was getting rave reviews from the client. But if you
Yeah.
asked me about my experience and there wasn't a fear of, I don't know, somebody coming at me for it, the honest answer was I was
Yeah.
not treated well behind the scenes at all. And
Yeah. I've
so,
had some experience like that, probably not quite as much as I think the worst of mine was struggling to actually get money, which I did eventually get. But most of the places that I worked since then has never been an issue. And some of that is down to reputation and leadership. If the people at the top are somewhat questionable, even if they seem to deliver great and they seem to be like the best people going, but if there's something there that's making you think maybe they don't live everything they preach, stuff like that, you may find that comes down, it flows down as well, and that there could be some issues
Mhm.
there. So I do think it's worth taking a look at that. You're right. Look at what people who have worked there have been saying about it
Oh,
and what
yeah.
their experience has been. People tend to talk about that stuff.
And don't assume, like, just because it might be a big name, oh, it must be a great company, right? They
Yeah.
must be awesome because it's this person. I'm going to say no, because no, that's all. That's all I'm going to say. Don't come
Don't
at
be
me.
blinded. Yeah, don't be blinded by glitzy packaging and stuff like that. The reality of what goes on behind the scenes could be very different. I certainly know many coaches who worked for a very well-known coaching organization before. I've coached many of them, and I know that they were making far less than I was as a coach, and mostly they weren't very
Mhm.
happy, and they weren't very well appreciated. Yeah, and just one of the reasons why I would never have gone and worked for
Yeah.
that particular organization, which I'm not going to name. But in terms of something like BetterUp, and I know there are some similar places, but I think we are generally talking about them because they are the top dog for this. The places that I know that are somewhat similar do not pay anything like as close. So if you're going to go down that path, you probably are, at least at the moment, mainly looking at them. And you also need to look at, do you already have your ICF certification? Because if you don't, that's a whole big thing. How much time are you going to have to spend on that? How much money are you going to have to invest in doing that? How many coaching hours are you going to have to build up to be able to get that certification? Or EMCC is
Mhm.
similarly, which I think EMCC is cheaper for those who are in Europe. And then, should you be lucky enough to get in with BetterUp, you have to go through their onboarding, which again is several months where you may not be earning very much. Are you set up for that? Are you prepared to,
Yeah.
it might be actually quite a while before you may have to invest a fair bit of money and time that you may not really have if you're just getting started. So
That's a
it's
great
all
question
stuff
for
you have
them
to
to
consider.
ask a company. I love that you brought that up actually, because you might, let's just say, for example, somebody answers an ad or something or is looking online and says, oh, I want to apply, and they send in a resume or whatever. One of the great questions to ask is, okay, I see that the range is that we're supposed to be able to handle between 10 and 20 calls a week. How long before I reach 10? And how long before I reach 20? Is there a criteria that must be met first of some kind? Because where I worked, there was a criteria. And I didn't know that because I went in thinking like, oh, this is great. I'm going to do this many sessions and I'm going to make this much per session. And that's going to equal this much per week. Because I mean, hi, you're sitting here, you're an adult, you want to know what you're making. And that wasn't the setup. And it wasn't a bait and switch. It wasn't like that. But I didn't realize that there was a process and that was going to take time. And I thought, well, geez, I have to go through training and I have to do all these things. And how long before I'm actually getting the full schedule? Whoa. And it was like 5, 6 months. It was 5 or 6 months, I believe, at the time. That is not a bad thing, but you want to ask that and ask somebody, say, hey, realistically, what's the timeline? What is ahead? What does it look like for coach's path? And you might get an ambiguous answer where it depends on how well you do and how acclimated you are and that kind of nonsense. And I don't buy into that. Well, it's up to you, really. No, that's shit. No.
I think you may also struggle to get hold of the people who you need to get hold of to be able to answer those kinds of questions for you.
That's it.
So I think that could be another issue. Is it is pretty much a data or an algorithmically run company.
Mhm.
So you getting hold of actual people that you need to speak to might be a little more challenging than you care for. You may not have direct reports as such. You may not get the sort of feedback in those sorts of ways. Feedback probably collated and sent back to you in a report rather than having a meeting with somebody where it's going to be delivered more personally. This is all my kind of imagining, or at least what my understanding from people who are working with them. And so there's good and bad to that. You're working very independently, but you can also be involved with some group things going on. And I know they do have those kinds of elements in there as well. So you're not necessarily out on your own. But I would say if your goal is to become $1 million coach, like earning $1 million or more a year sooner rather than later.
Putting it out there.
That's probably not the fastest way to get there. And you're not going to be making that kind of money really with BetterUp unless you're working ridiculous hours. And
listen, there are so many companies, exec.com. If you actually just did a Google search, there are so many coaching companies out there. And again, I think it really just comes back to what's the vision, what's your need, what's your necessity? Do you need to be making money immediately? Well, maybe going into coaching or transitioning out of a full-time job all at once doesn't make sense. Maybe there is a transitional period that needs to happen so that you can have the best experience and the best outcomes possible, no matter which path you decide to take. But I think at the same time, you really have to have some idea of what you want. You will learn as you go. As John and I share our own experiences, right? It's, some of them are similar and some of them aren't. I've learned a lot just by talking with him and saying, oh, I didn't know that could even be a thing. But do the best you can to do your research, to see how companies, and if you're interviewed by somebody, don't be afraid to interview them back, right? Don't be so like with any job. Don't be like, I'm just ready to take this job because I saw that it pays whatever, $125 a session. And okay, but ask them good questions, right? About what the expectation is, how many, is it algorithm based? Because the company I worked for, it was not. You were chosen based on the background and the need of the person coming in. So essentially, I guess it is, but it's not. It was really like, we're just going to give this person to Angie because she can handle them. They're this, they're that. It wasn't, it was personally just, it was decided in that moment. I always had that question in my head. Is there any favoritism going on? No, really, seriously, you're laughing, but even for or against me, right? And not always against me. Am I just getting people because I can handle a challenging client? So you just want to ask a lot of those baseline questions. What's the expectation in terms of count? And how long do your coaches last? You can ask those kinds of questions. I don't know. Yeah. I think it's not so black and white.
No. But what's your take on, I think we've both encountered this, the companies, organizations where they have a set of programs and they want you to have taken all of the programs before you can be a coach for them?
I did that. Yes.
Yeah, I've done it too.
Taking them, I'm not a big fan of, hey, pay for our program and then you can coach for us necessarily. Let me think how I want to articulate this. So my feeling is I don't want to pay to be trained. Okay. However, if I'm taking, after I'm trained and I'm working for this company, if I'm taking their intellectual property and using it outside of their umbrella, their company, then I don't mind paying for that certification or that, like whatever. I don't mind that. But I'm not, absolutely not going to pay for my own training, essentially, is what it comes down to. Not going to do that.
Yeah, I feel the same. I mean, I was in a situation where I'd already done the trainings and got offered the coaching position, so I didn't actually have to pay to go and do the training just so I could do the job, as I had already done them, and that's one of the reasons that I was invited. But with the same company, I was responsible for introducing new coaches around Europe for a while. And so I was interviewing people at events and putting them forward. But the director in charge of all that was asking them to basically become coaching clients for 3 months before coming to the program, which I didn't like and I didn't agree with, because they had to pay to come into the program as clients. To have that experience, that should not be happening. So
no, but you know what? I did in one space, I did have to, part of my training, and I got paid for this training. It wasn't a lot, but I did get paid. I had to go through their program, their framework, because it was specific, modules and whatnot. I had to go through it as a client first. Then I was trained on it from the coaching perspective as well.
So, I mean, I've
I
done
was
that
fine
too,
with that.
but you didn't have to pay for it, right? You
No, I
just
got
were
paid.
expected to.
I got paid for it. Yeah.
You were expected to learn all the materials that you would need to
Sure.
know in order to do that.
Yeah.
Because I think even in the situation where I had already done the trainings, there was a bunch of other trainings that weren't even available in the UK where I was based at the time that I needed to know. So I had to do watch recordings of those and get brought up to speed on all the bits. But I was never expected to pay for any of that. And there's some dodgy stuff going out there. So it was one of those things that it seems like a really great job offer, and then they're asking you to pay up to be able to pay to play. Have a good think about it and look into it. Really do your research. Like, some of these places are reputable, but they do have that kind of model and may well work out very well for you, but not everywhere is. So do your homework on that and before you start putting money into it, because it's all too easy to have things look really great and shiny and not have all these promises made to you that may just end up not getting delivered. I've been there, Angie, and it really sucks. I think maybe you have as well.
Yeah, I didn't have a bad experience with the company that I did. I only did it with one company, and I didn't have a bad experience. I loved the program. I believed in the process. That was important for me. It was in alignment with how I like to coach. Also, although it was framework, there was a lot of room to still sprinkle a whole bunch of Angie into the sessions, right? And that was important for me. Again, on the back end, it was just not a good experience for me. I was like, yeah, I'm going to go venture out into the cold a little bit. It's got to be better.
I do think if you're very much a go-getter, if you're a type A kind of overachiever and really ready to go for it, you might feel a bit held back by some of these companies, organizations, and you might well be better off just going for it by yourself, figuring out what your niche is, doing all your marketing and getting into it. But if you want to go a bit slower with that, have time to figure out what that is, work on your niche, learn all the stuff about marketing and have some income coming through, and I think this could be one of the ways that you might choose to go. There are other coaching opportunities out there. There are some that don't require you to have ICF or EMCC certifications, just so you know. It's not, whilst it may be starting to become a bit more of a standard, it's not there yet. So just know that you're not excluded from the market. But also, you might be thinking, can I get to work with some of those big name companies? If I want to work with people from Google or MasterCard, or I'm trying to think of big name companies off the top of my head.
Right.
But if you want to work with those people and you know that like BetterUp or somewhere similar has contracts with them, can you still get work with them? Yeah, you can.
Oh,
Simple
absolutely.
answer, yes, you can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not exclusive.
Yeah, it's not a monopoly as much as they might wish it was. We've probably covered about as much as we need to with this, but it's certainly an interesting topic. We'd like to know maybe what you think and where you are with this. Maybe you're working with BetterUp or somewhere similar. Maybe you've had some good experiences with this. Maybe you've not had good experiences. Let us know, and let us know what your questions are that you want answered, either related to the business of coaching or the practice of coaching. You can contact us at speakpipe.com. That's speakpipe, as it sounds.com. /the Coaching Clinic podcast. You can find the link in the show notes. You can leave us a voicemail and let us know your thoughts and your questions. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you guys all take advantage. It's been great.
Yeah, and we'll see you again very soon with another episode. Have a super week.
Bye-bye.